Hello, I'm Rabyd, otherwise known as the Rabyd Atheist, a former pastor turned atheist, and now a compassionate anti-theist. Welcome to my channel. You are free to like or dislike the video, so feel free to hit those buttons. Feel free to comment below, and I would appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel and hit your notification bell for more content as it is released. You're also free to share my videos as much as you like. Still continuing to try to grow the channel. This is my Friday video, and it's actually not Friday. I'm recording it early because I'm looking at my schedule and I'm not seeing a lot of time to do so. So I'm going to do it today here on Wednesday. But it is a Friday video, so it's mostly the content is influenced by the comments section. And last week I talked a lot about Pascal's wager because it came up in some of the comments, and I had a long discussion, I guess, a medium-sized discussion in the comments section below that video with the scapegoat mechanism. And just it was a good, polite, interesting conversation about whether, Pascal was being fairly represented in general. I read Pascal, oh gosh, it must have been back in seminary. I was reading a lot of things back then, and I was reading Pascal, and I want to say, as a man, Pascal was a brilliant mathematician. Some of his stuff is still in use today, and that's because he was a brilliant math mind. He, however, was very, very Christian and very devoted to his faith, regardless of what the evidence might be. And so his wager is based on the simple idea, it's better to wager that there is a God and there's no, that way if there is a heaven to gain and a hell to shun, then your bet is safer than the person who simply says, I'm not going to believe in God and I'm not going to. Because if there is no God, then nobody really loses anything. So Pascal's claim was that that was the safe bet to believe in God. And I, of course, did a video dealing with most of the objections to that idea. And I think the most telling objection to me is Pascal does not even consider the alternative things of the afterlife or the different gods that could be involved. I mean, you literally get a probability of 50% every time for every god that's mentioned. Eventually, you have a probability that's higher than 100%. When you're dealing with it, and it really becomes like a roulette wheel to me, where you're basically placing your bets on God, black 22 or goddess red 14, I think is what I said in the comments. And you're hoping that your number comes up. That it's far more complicated a wager than Pascal is making it out to be. And that's kind of my objection to whole Pascal's wager. So there's that issue. The reason I think there is that I don't accept Pascal is not so much that I'm an atheist. I just feel it's fallacious and flawed, but I also think there's a better argument to be had. And it's a much older argument that has existed for a long time. And I find it to be very sound, and that's the argument of Marcus Aurelius. Marcus Aurelius was a pretty brilliant man in his own right, and his argument about the God or gods or whatever is a little bit more all-inclusive, and he's not telling you to place your bets. He's telling you that there is one path that you should follow regardless. And to me, this is a little bit more telling and probably a little bit more true, in my opinion, and it seems to encompass a little bit more of all the philosophical issues that could go forward. So Marcus Aurelius' statement about the gods, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, he basically says, number one, if there are gods and they're benevolent, then they will judge you based on your merit and by your ability to follow virtue. Because Marcus Aurelius' basic tenet is live virtuously, follow a virtuous life. live a good life, okay? Because the first possibility to him is that there are gods or goddesses or some combination, and there's benevolence, and they will judge you. Now, there is an assumption that the gods exist to judge in this argument, but that's pretty much most religions assume that part of the afterlife is a judgment based on something. In Marcus Aurelius' case, he felt that being judged on virtue and on earning your reward through being a good person made a lot more sense than just some arbitrary decision. So Marcus Aurelius proposed, if there are gods and they're benevolent and you're following after virtue, then they will judge you based on that virtue and you will earn whatever reward that they have in store for you. The second premise he has is if there are gods and they are malevolent, owing to the possibility that maybe God either A, doesn't care or is a malevolent God, and that he, then by living virtuously, you will learn that you really don't want to serve such gods. Serving such gods is counter to virtue, and virtue is more important than service to Marcus Aurelius, and I would agree with that. To me, the God that is malevolent is not a God that I want to serve. I'd rather be a good person and engage that discussion along those lines. So, and I would rather live virtuously. His third tenet is if there are no gods, if there is no afterlife, then by living virtuously, you'll have lived a good life. You'll have had a good life, regardless of whether there's a divine or anything, and you'll live on in the memories of your family, and you'll have left a good legacy of a better humanity to follow in your wake. And I've been kind of trying to follow this idea of just living virtuously, because as I look at all the three major possibilities, that there is some sort of divine force and it's benevolent, or there's a divine force and malevolent, or there's no divine force at all, these seem to be much more of a surer bet, if you will, because it's not really betting. It's saying live according to virtue, live according to, have some good character, find the virtues that fit you and live them out. And so this to me is better because this isn't really a wager. To me, this is where the person sits down at Pascal's wager, realizes there's 100 million options, gets up on the table and decides to go live their life as best they can, living it as virtuously can. And it is effectively, to me, taking the coin that I would bet on one of those gods and putting it in my pocket and walking away and living a virtuous life. To me, that analogy fits a little bit better. Now, I'm not saying, I love the conversation with the scapegoat mechanism. He was very polite. It's the kind of conversation I want to continue to have on this channel. But I think to me, and this is where I'm at as an atheist, I would rather engage the question of what if I'm wrong from the standpoint of doing something virtuous and doing something good and right in the world. Because then if there are gods or God or whatever, or some divine force afterwards, and I turn out to be wrong, then to me, I don't want to be judged by some arbitrary decree, such as accepting Jesus Christ as personal Savior, whatever that means. I don't want to be saved by some arbitrary action of God like grace. I don't want that. To me, that seems like cheating. Okay, to me, from a virtuous standpoint of living honorably, that would not be a good thing to me. To me, that just seems to be very arbitrary and capricious, and I would consider that malevolent now. The fact that God is of the Bible, it basically chooses a chosen people and everybody else has to die, it's very malevolent to me. I consider the God of the Bible to be, I think it's Richard Dawkins who described him as the most unpleasant character in all of fiction. And then I do believe that Dan Barker took that quote and did a book and basically used Bible verses to prove every point that Richard Dawkins made, and is continuing to work on that. So when you look at that idea, you need to understand that to me, when I look at the God of the Bible, I'm not going to engage. If he turns out to be the God that exists, much like Matt Dillahunty, I'm going to be disappointed, because to me, the God of the Bible is a very big disappointment. He is murderous. He is, he orders genocide. There's a passage in one of the prophets where he basically says he's allowing the women of the country to be raped, and he is the one that's raping them. There's these moments where the God of the Bible is very human and very evil, in my opinion. And just the whole idea of an arbitrary standard of whether or not you just accepted Jesus Christ as your Savior seems very arbitrary and very capricious. I would much rather be judged on my virtues, and I would much rather have some sort of afterlife that has more than two options. It seems strange to me that an omnipotent, intelligent God, an all-wise God, would create a fate where it's eternal fire forever or eternal bliss forever. And when you really think about that really hard dichotomy, that just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And from Marcus Aurelius' principle on the malevolency, I don't want to serve such a God. If the God of the Bible, sorry, he's an evil bastard. Okay, when you really strip away your rose-colored glasses of wanting to see the God of the Bible as a good person, some of the stuff that he orders is just straight up malevolent. Take the genocide of the Canaanites, for example. I don't think people fully grasp what God ordered there, because what God orders is that the army of God is supposed to go into the land of Canaan, and they are supposed to drive everybody out, and they are supposed to kill everyone. Okay, now you need to. I use this word story to illustrate this point many times before. An Israeli soldier under the command of Joshua kicks in the door to a Canaanite home. He is greeted first by the father of the household, who is wearing a shield and sword, and they fight each other, and the Israeli soldier kills that man. Okay, well, it's all fair. We're at war, we're conquesting. We might want to, we might have some reservations of why the Israelites are fighting, which is basically to come in and conquest and take the land that currently belongs to somebody else by possession. But we could quibble on whether the motives for the war were just. But two soldiers fighting each other in war and one getting killed is not a problem. It happens, and for most people, I don't think that's as morally objectionable as about what I'm about to say next. When the Israeli soldier enters the next room, he finds the mother, the wife of the man, who is also a mother. She has her newborn child's son suckling at her breasts, and she has her virgin daughter, who is roughly 7 years old, hiding behind her. And she is kind of crouched down trying to hide as well. According to the decree of God, the following things have to happen. The Israeli soldier is supposed to run the mother through with his spear or sword and kill her. He's supposed to check the baby to make sure if it's a boy or a girl. If it is a boy, and in this case it is an infant boy, barely suckling and barely on its mother's breast, he's supposed to kill that child too. That's what it says. He's supposed to kill the baby because it's a boy. The 7-year-old girl gets spared, but her fate is a little bit different. When she gets old enough, she will become the slave of that soldier, and when she gets old enough, he will possess every sexual right to her. In other words, when she gets old enough, probably as soon as she starts, having her menstrual cycle, he'll be able to have sex with her, and he'll be fully within his rights to do so, even if he has other wives. She will essentially be his sex slave. Most Christians don't want to face that that's what God ordered, but if you read all the orders of God, that is what he does. And to me, such a God is malevolent. I would not want to serve him under Marcus Aurelius's argument. Sorry, if it turns out that the God of the Bible turns to be true and I end up in hell, I will be shaking my fist at such a malevolent, evil God. I struggled was saying that for years, but I'm sorry, you cannot read the Bible and look at it objectively in a sense of reading what it really says. You can't keep glossing over the passages where God just basically gets pissed off and kills people. It's just not a good picture of God. And the New Testament isn't any better because literally God's best plan, his best course of action, is to have his son killed so that people can come to him and get forgiveness for their sins. And the logic really is I'm going to kill myself in order to appease myself so that I can forgive others so that I don't send them to hell because they don't, that I created. It really gets convoluted and stupid. Your only answer is this. You're the omnipotent God of the universe and you can't just forgive. Sorry, it just doesn't make any sense to me. So yes, if the God of the Bible turns out to be real, I will consider him malevolent, and I will continue to shake my fist from hell at him. Sorry, I'm an unrepentant person when it comes to the God of the Bible, because the more I studied the God of the Bible, the more I really began to realize he's a very unpleasant person and quite weird because he seems to have multiple personalities and do a lot of different things. He talks out of both sides of his mouth. I'm a merciful, just God, but you know what? I'll punish the innocent children, grandchildren, great grandchildren on into the future. But if there is a God and he turns out to be benevolent, I have really no fear in picking up the coin from Pascal's wager, putting it in my pocket, and living virtuously, because that God would judge me by the virtues I followed and how I tried to be a better person. And I think also such a benevolent God would have different levels of reward and maybe a little bit of punishment, for those that are truly evil. But I don't know. It seems to me that a malevolent God or a benevolent God looking at his creation and truly loving them and truly desiring that none should perish, but everybody find eternal life, that's what would happen. Because God would find some way to rehabilitate that person. They would have power to do that. Of course, we could also have the argument that why would God create a world where such suffering and evil can take place? And quite frankly, I think this is the biggest thing that speaks against a creator God. It seems to me that God could have created a world where free will could be exercised and choices could be made without all the massive death and suffering that seems to be necessary. And of course, somebody asked me, and this kind of goes to another comment I received, well, what purpose does an atheist have? I like some analogies that many other atheists have made about purpose. I have a car out in the parking lot of my apartment building. That car's purpose is to get me back and forth. There will come a day when that car will sit in a junkyard and be, in a sense, dead and no longer fulfill that purpose. Just because something doesn't have a long-term purpose doesn't mean that it doesn't have a purpose now and in the now. My life has purpose in that I am the one who is living it, and it is me who defines what that purpose is. And so when I get back to Marcus Aurelius and I say, if there is no God, then I will live a good life. Well, to me, the purpose of life is to live a virtuous, good life, regardless of whether there are gods or not. I don't need them to do that. And in any possibility to me, if there's a divine force that's malevolent, if there's a divine force that doesn't give a shit, if there's a divine force that is malevolent, all three of those options are covered for me, regardless of what the divine force is. In one case, I will be happy to serve such a benevolent God who judges me on my virtue. In the other one, I'd rather shake my fist from hell at him for being a malevolent bastard, because I believe goodness should trump any God, any might makes right decree. I just don't have time for the might makes right anymore. And if there is no God, well, then I'll still have a good life before it passes on and it ceases to exist and no longer has a purpose. I know people have a hard time with that part of it, and I think that's why we cling to faith. We fear death. We want to have some sense of serving something larger than ourselves. These are all wonderful, great things, except they may not be true. And we're just deluding ourselves, trying to figure out how to survive something that's unsurvivable. I think it's the height at some points of arrogance to assume that we survive this life and somehow continue to exist. And I just don't believe it anymore. I really work hard to just live the best life I can because this is the life I have. I want to thank the scapegoat mechanism for a great conversation, and this is the kind of thing that you can talk to me about in the comments section, and it's the kind of thing that will make the Friday videos. This is week 6 of the YouTube channel, and I appreciate everybody who continues to listen or continues to watch the videos and continues to subscribe. No new subscribers, but one thing I have noticed is video watch time continues to climb, so people that are subscribers are watching the videos, and I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Once again, welcome to my channel. As you can see, comments have a way of influencing the content of Friday's videos, and I will respond to any comment when I can. I still haven't reached the point where I have so many that I can't respond to them all, so you're more than welcome to do so. You can always ask a direct question of me anytime, and based on how expert I am, and I'll try to answer it. You can also make suggestions for what you would like to see me do. I'm currently running through how the 10 Commandments suck, but I'm very open up to any other idea. If you have an itch and want me to scratch it, I guess I'll find a way to do it. Videos are uploaded Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and that time of that really depends on when I get them finished. I don't tolerate name calling in the comments section. If you want to demonstrate somebody's stupid, that's fine. Just don't call them stupid. That's not an argument. Make your argument. Be sure to like, subscribe, and get your notifications set to according to what you want them to be. And hopefully, I can someday convince you to be a rabid atheist like myself. In the meantime, I wish you a great day and a great weekend, and goodbye.